Okay, in this video we're going to be continuing to talk about assemblies. We've got our assembly of this USB project that we've started off right here, and right now what I want to do is just talk to you guys a little bit about file organization and hopefully get you guys on the right foot as far as that's concerned. So as you can see, I am the type of guy who likes to make folders for every single different type of file. So I've got zip files here. I've got another project here for today, and then I've got renderings here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder for assemblies. So I'm just going to call that ASM. And then I notice that I've got over here, if I expand this a little bit, I have two different types of files in my collection here for this document. I have the assembly file, and then I have all the part documents. So I can just go ahead and just put the assembly file there where it needs to be. And it looks like because it's open, it doesn't really want to move it. So I'll have to close that down. So we'll just say, okay, close down. And then we'll go back to here, and then we'll move it to the place where I want it to be. Okay. Now, I don't have that many part files in this, and I kind of like to know what part files I have if I'm building an external document, but I could also create a folder for part documents as well. So why don't we just do that just for the heck of it. All right, there we go. And there we go. Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's close out of that. Or actually now at this point, since I've got my files saved in a nice, neat, and orderly fashion, let's get in here and try to open up this ASM file and see what happens. Now here's a problem. See, this is my goal, was to show you guys a problem. Think of your assembly file. It's built from these external files. Each one of those external files has a specific path that leads to it on the computer, like C drive, users, in my case Jim DC, and then it'll be into the folder, and then da-da-da-da. Well, what I just did when I was organizing my files there was I changed the path to those files that make up the assembly. And so now I have this warning box. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about this if you find this warning box. All this means is that SolidWorks cannot find the files that are associated with your assembly. So you need to reset the path, okay? So you have that option here, browse for file, or you also have the option to just suppress the components that SolidWorks cannot find. In this case, since we moved all of these part documents into their own folder called parts, then we're going to have, SolidWorks can't find any of them. So if I hit suppress components, it's going to warn me a bunch of times because it really doesn't want to have to do that. But finally it will, and it suppresses all the components, and it just shows up as blank. All of the suppressed components are over here, and they're all grayed out, and we have nothing fun to look at, okay? So don't worry. We can go here, and we can select all of these. I think we can do it all at once. Do a right-click, and go to Set to Resolved. Now when we go Set to Resolved, we bring up the exact same warning dialog box that we saw before, and we now can go back to the option Browse for File. We'll go here to our parts document inside of our USB folder. Sorry, our parts folder inside a USB project folder. Here is it. So we'll double click that, and then we will select all of these things. If it only wants to do one at a time, we can play that game too. But since all those parts are saved in the same location, just setting the path to one of the files allows them to all come back. Anyway, there we go. Okay, so I'm trying to instill a concept in you guys, which is that when you are creating assemblies, it is very important to keep yourself very organized. Think about what parts are you creating externally, where are those parts saved on your computer, and then try to understand that your assembly will be drawing from those files all the time. If you change the location of where those part files are kept, you're going to have to suppress them when you open your assembly, and you don't want that. So, you know, you're going to have to then go through this little process that I just explained. Okay, so try to keep yourself organized when you're doing part files. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys a couple more examples now. Okay, so far these are external files, right? They were built in the external part file. There's also the concept of creating something called virtual components. A virtual component is a component that you build inside of an assembly. Now, if I wanted to edit one of these, I could do that, and we'll talk about that in a little while. There's different ways to do that. But let's talk about building a new part in here that goes along with these ones, okay? So at any point, I can go to New Part, and I'll select a plane to start on, and then I'll grab a sketch to draw on. I'll draw out a sketch, and then I'll just extrude, boss base it a little bit. There we go. That's way too high. 0.5. Very good. Let's throw some fillets on there. Throw a big fillet on that side. Very good. And let's talk about a shell on the top. Let's see, 3 millimeters. 3 millimeters is really fat. Let's change that to 2 millimeters. There we go. All right, so now we've got this new part that we've built in here too. We probably want another fillet on there, right? Yeah, we do. We want this one to be filleted too. Let's see. We want that fillet to be smaller. 0.05, excuse me. 0.05. There we go. Okay, cool. So here's who knows why this is part of the USB, but the concept is that this is a part that's built inside of an assembly. It does not have a part file associated with it at this point. Now, it's very important for us to always try to create a part file to go along with everything that we build virtually inside of an assembly. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One really easy way would be to exit this new component that we just created, go over here, take a look at the name in the design tree. See how it's got brackets around it? And none of the other ones have brackets around them? Those brackets mean that this is a virtual component. They mean that it was built inside of Solidworks, okay? Or sorry, inside of a Solidworks assembly. Okay, so if you see those brackets, you got to know there's no part file associated with that, okay? And that means you're not going to be able to 3D print that. It means that it's basically just kind of like a digital version, or it's a virtual version, okay? So we always want to make part files to go along with those. So one way to handle it would be to do a right click and go to Save Part in External File. And if we do that, we get this dialog box, which is Save As. It's going to give us the path where it's going to save it, and it's going to show us the name that it's going to save it as. So that's one way. If I hit OK, it will automatically create a part file for this thing in this, at this location. Okay, and that location I can recognize is the folder where I've got all my other parts. Okay, so that's a good thing. But I'm going to cancel right now because I want to show you another way. Okay. Now, if you have a virtual component inside of your assembly and you have forgotten to save it externally like this, okay, you do have the option to just go to Save This Assembly. And when you save it, you're going to get a bunch of warnings, okay? SolidWorks wants to create part files for all of your virtual components. First one it is. Following models referred to in this document have been modified, and here's the one that was modified, part number 2. Okay, so we know that we modified it. We added all the fillets. We built it. I mean, that's a modification, so we want to save that. So first we're going to save it in the assembly. So there's that. Then you're going to get this warning box, another Save As, which warns you, this assembly contains unsaved virtual components which must be saved. Now, you do have the option to just continue to have them as virtual components inside of the assembly, but why not have a part file associated with this thing? Because if we do want to individually take measurements off of it or whatever, or if we do want to 3D print it on its own, it'd just be more beneficial for us to always have a part file of it as well. And so what we do there is we want to save it externally. So I'll click on Save Externally, Specify Paths. This is the same Save As dialog box that we saw before. It's just showing us the file name, and it's showing us the location where it's saving that file as. And we'll just hit OK, and then it saves our assembly document. So that's the second kind of like security measure, we'll call it, that SolidWorks gives you when you are dealing with an assembly that has virtual components in it. So as you try to save that assembly file, it's going to say, hey, you know, you've got stuff in here that's just purely virtual. Aren't you sure? Are you sure you don't just want to save a part file as well? And so it's going to catch you at the last minute. So keep your eyes peeled for those warnings. And if you see any of them come up, then you know what you got to do. Okay. Take a look over here at the design tree and just have a notice that those brackets that defined this part here as a virtual component are now gone. Okay. And also now take a look at the idea that we can go here and we can do a right click on this part itself. we can go to open up part, and then we can open up this part in its own part file now. We can adjust some of the features if we'd like. That was, of course, too big, 0.025. There we go. And then when we close this document and we save the changes, and it will say, hey, this is something that's in an assembly. You want to rebuild the assembly now? You can say yes. Okay. And then you can take a look here and you can see that it's now updated it in the assembly file. Okay. So now the question came up in class, you know, how should I do this? Should I adjust this thing inside of the assembly, or should I open it up inside of its own part file and then adjust it and then save it and have it update in the assembly? That's really up to you. It's whatever works for you. If you're the type of person who's getting confused with having all of these parts hanging out around, well, then maybe you want to go and you want to click on an individual part and you want to open that part in its own part file like this, and then exit out of it. And if you change it, you know, it'll update. Or if you're not getting confused, or if you hide all these other objects, you can work on a part individually. It's a little bit more efficient if you can work on a part individually inside of an assembly and just have all your updates there. And then when you go to close the assembly, you're going to get that dialog box there that's going to say, hey, you modified this part. Do you want to save those changes? You're going to say yes, you know. So it's a hard question to answer, but it's up to you as the designer to try both ways and then determine which way is better for you as an individual. So that's it for the difference between internal and external components in an assembly. All right, so keep plugging away at it, and don't forget to apply some mates and stuff from the previous tutorials on assemblies. And as always, get in touch if you've got some additional questions or concerns about how your assemblies are coming together. And we're going to talk about more of this later on coming up in class. So thanks a lot for watching, and have a good one. Bye.